Why would my stepmother send me to fetch water from the river at midnight, knowing that it is very deadly and terrifying? I might not come back. I don't know what to do. She told me that if I return without water, she will kill me. Amaka was filled with fear and confusion. Once upon a time, there was a spirit called the deceiver and destroyer. This spirit lives in a river known as the Imo River. It was deadly and powerful, constantly seeking someone to enter the river at midnight so it could possess them and use their body to deceive and destroy others. Yet, no one dared to visit the river at such a late hour because the river only displayed its powers at midnight. The Imo River was the only river around the town, and people only went there during the day. Even then, people were afraid of it. The river gave off an air light that filled anyone who looked at it with fear. There was a girl named Amaka. Her mother had died while giving birth to her, and Amaka was her only child. Before she passed, Amaka's mother blessed her, saying, "Amaka, as I leave this world, I bless you. You shall never die prematurely. Even if your enemies believe you are dead, you will rise and prove them wrong. You will succeed, marry, and have many children. Nothing will harm you." After Amaka's mother died, her father Obinna remarried. His new wife, Susana, despised Amaka with a passion. Whenever Susana saw her, she looked at her as if she were an animal, like a goat or chicken. No one understood the reason for Susana's hatred. Some thought she was happy that Amaka's mother was gone and that her mistreatment was a way to mock the deceased woman. Despite Susana's treatment, Amaka respected her stepmother, accepting her as her own mother. She did all the chores in the house and cared for Susana's children, treating them as her own siblings. Still, her stepmother hated her deeply, treating her like a slave. Every day and night, Susana found ways to punish Amaka. Yet, Amaka never harbored ill will against her. Obinna, however, loved Amaka dearly. Every time he looked at her, he was reminded of her mother and felt a deep unspoken sorrow. Amaka looked so much like her mother that Obinna's heart ached. He missed his late wife, whom he did love so much. Her death had nearly broken him. Obinna worked in a company in another state and could only visit his family once a month, bringing money to support them. He was unaware that Susana was maltreating Amaka. Whenever he was home, Susana pretended to be a loving stepmother, showering Amaka with love and kindness, even going as far as to scold her own children in front of him. In Obinna's presence, Susana treated Amaka like a queen, giving him the false impression that she loved Amaka. Amaka never told her father about her stepmother's abuse, thinking that one day Susana might change. When her father asked if Susana treated her well, Amaka would lie, saying, "Yes, she is good to me. She loves me as her own daughter." Obinna, relieved, would respond, "That's all I want, Amaka. I don't want you to suffer. Your mother has already paid the price. If I ever see you suffer, it would break my heart. You remind me so much of your mother, Udoka. She was a wonderful wife, and I had hoped we would be together forever. But fate had other plans." Susana has 3 children, 2 boys, Ifeanyi and Junior, and a girl, Precious. They all loved Amaka and considered her their elder sister. When their mother mistreated Amaka, They would often cry, pleading with her to stop, but Susana ignored their pleas. One day, after Obina spent some time at home, he prepared to return to work. As soon as he left, Susana called Amaka over. When Amaka approached, Susana slapped her, causing her to fall to the ground. You see how you act around your father, pretending as if I am hurting you. Susana sneered. Ma, I didn't say anything to him. I even told him that you treat me well. Amaka replied, holding back tears. Am I mistreating you? Or you just too stupid to know better? Susana shot back, slapping Amaka's head again. She then ordered Amaka to gather all her children's dirty clothes and start washing them. Despite feeling unwell, Amaka began to protest, but Susana slapped her hard, silencing her. Amaka quickly gathered both clean and dirty clothes and began washing them. As she scrubs, tears streamed down her face. Amaka spent the entire afternoon washing her step-siblings' clothes under the blazing sun. Her hands were raw and her eyes stung from the mixture of soap and sweat. Despite the pain and exhaustion, she continued, determined to finish the task before her stepmother found another reason to punish her. As the sun began to set, Susana watched her from the doorway, arms crossed, a look of cruel satisfaction on her face. When Amaka finally finished, Susana snapped, "What took you so long, lazy girl?" She grabbed Amaka by the arm, pulling her towards the kitchen. "Now, go and prepare dinner. My children can't eat late because of your incompetence." Amaka bit her lip, holding back her frustration. She dragged herself to the kitchen and began cooking, her body aching from the day's work. Her step-siblings, Precious, Ifeanyi and Junior, watched her with worried expressions, but they dare not interfere with their mother's wrath. That night, after everyone had eaten, Susana ordered Amaka to stay up and clean the entire house. Amaka's eyes grew heavy as she mopped the floor and scrubbed the kitchen, her small frame barely able to carry the weight of her chores. By the time she finished, it was almost midnight. She went to her room and collapsed on her mat, barely able to lift her head. Just as Amaka closed her eyes, she felt someone standing over her. She opened them slowly, only to see Susana looming in the doorway, her face shadowed and cold. "Get up," Susana commanded in a low voice. Amaka's heart skipped a beat. "Ma, please, I am tired." "You dare speak back to me?" Susana hissed. She grabbed Amaka by the arm and yanked her to her feet. "You think I am done with you? Follow me, Amaka, and don't complain. You will regret it tonight." Amaka stood up and followed her. She wasn't happy because she had worked so hard that day and was just about to rest. But her stepmother, Susana, came again to wake her up. Susana didn't tell Amaka why she had woken her in the middle of the night. Amaka followed her until they reached the backyard. "Why did you leave this soap outside? Don't you know that soap is costly? Is it because of this soap that you woke me up, Ma? You could have just picked it up yourself. It wouldn't make you any less in charge of this house. You know I have worked so hard today and need to rest." "How dare you talk to me like that? So I am now your slave or your maid. Before I close my eyes and open them, you had better pick up this soap and put it back in the house." Amaka picked up the soap and started going inside. As she went, she thought to herself, "This is our backyard and it's protected. No one can come in here and take it. Why does my stepmom always look for ways to punish me? I don't like how she treats me in this house. Is it because my mother is dead or because my father isn't around?" She sighed. "Okay, there is God." When Amaka put the soap away, She went back inside and went to sleep. As the sun rose the next morning, Amaka was already up and busy with her chores. She moved from one task to another, her small hands scrubbing, washing, and sweeping. Her stepmother, Susana, lounged in the sitting room, watching her with a cold, calculating gaze. Amaka, are you deaf? I asked you to clean these floors until they shine, but I can still see dust. Do it all over again. Amaka looked at the floor. She had just scrubbed meticulously, but she didn't argue. She knew better than to talk back, especially after last night's scolding. She nodded, took her cleaning rag and went over the floor once more, her back aching and her eyes heavy with exhaustion. After hours of cleaning, Amaka took a short break, hoping Susana wouldn't notice. But her stepmother's voice pierced through the silence almost immediately. Who told you to rest? Do you think you are here to relax? I am sorry. I was just catching my breath. Catching your breath? Catching your breath won't make you any more useful. Go to the market. We are running low on tomatoes and peppers, and don't even think about coming back without the best quality. Amaka forced herself up, despite the weariness in her limbs, and headed for the market. She walked quickly, making sure to get everything on Susana's list. She was extra careful not to make any mistakes, knowing any error would lead to more punishment. When she returned home, Susana inspected every item with a frown. Look at this tomato. It's soft. Did I ask you to bring me rotten vegetables? But it's not rotten. It's just... Susana slapped her hard across the face before she could finish. I don't need your excuses, Amaka. Do you think I am stupid? Amaka beat back her tears and quietly took the slap. Knowing any attempt to defend herself would only make things worse, she carried the bags into the kitchen and started preparing dinner as Susana ordered. As she stirred the pot, Amaka thought of her mother. She remembered the comforting words her mother had always spoken, telling her that she would be strong, that she was destined to thrive no matter what came her way. Those words were the only thing keeping her from breaking under Susana's cruelty. Holding onto her mother's words, she whispered to herself, "There is God, and He sees everything." As night fell and Amaka finished her chores, she retired to her small room, and her body bruised and tired. She lay on her mat, praying silently, hoping for an escape from her sufferings. As Amaka was still resting in her room that night, Nepa took the light. She murmured to herself, "Why did Nepa take the light this night? I don't know if my stepmom managed to pump the water she wanted before I came inside." Earlier, before Amaka went to her room, Susana, her stepmother, wanted to pump water for something she planned to do that night, but whatever it was didn't seem important. From inside her room, Amaka muttered, "I hope this NEPA power cut doesn't work against me. I am aware my stepmother was trying to pump water. I hope she got enough before the light went out." As Amaka was talking to herself, she heard a voice echoing through the house. "Amaka! Amaka! Come here!" "Yes, ma, I am coming," Amaka said, quickly standing up. "Why is my stepmother calling me like this? I hope all is well." She hurried out to meet her. When she reached her, Susana said, "What took you so long?" "Ma, I didn't waste time. I only just heard your calling," Amaka replied. Susana frowned. "I know, but you still took too long to respond." "I am sorry, ma," Amaka replied, her body trembling. She feared her stepmother would beat her that night, unaware that what Susana had in mind was worse than a simple beating. Susana continued, Amaka, I was trying to pump water, but NEPA took the light before I could finish. I need water for something. So, I want you to go to Imo River and fetch some water for me. I need it to wash my underwear. You know how much I hate that. Amaka's eyes widened. Imo River? No, 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 no. I can't go there. I've heard how dangerous that river is, especially at night. I don't want to go there.
As fear settled into Amaka's bones, she shook her head, trembling. Stories about the dangers of the Imo River came to her mind. She tried to gather the courage to explain her fears to Susana, but she knew it would be useless. Susana's face darkened with anger. Are you refusing me? Do you think you can decide when to obey me? Or do you think you are bold enough to challenge me in my own house? Amaka swallowed hard, fighting to keep the tears from spilling. No, ma, it's not safe at night. Susana's sleep called into a sneer. You ungrateful child, who do you think you are? After all I have done for you, you dare talk back to me? You will go to that river, Amaka, or you will wish you had. Now, get moving. Amaka replied, I have been obeying you all this while, but for this one, I am not going anywhere. I don't want anything to happen to me. I have heard how dangerous the river is, and I don't think it's safe to go. In response, Susana hit Amaka on her back. How dare you challenge me in this house? She started beating Amaka, and Amaka began crying and begging Susana for mercy. But Susana did not relent. Finally, Amaka agreed to go to the river because the beating was too much. Susana sneered, Better, I thought you said you weren't going. With her heart pounding, Amaka grabbed a small bucket, hoping she could get to the river and back quickly, avoiding any harm. She took one last look at the house, feeling a strange ominous sensation in the pit of her stomach. As she walked towards the darkened path leading to the Imo River, her mother's words echoed in her mind. You are destined to thrive, Amaka. You are strong. The path grew narrower as she neared the river, shadows stretching across the trees and casting airy shapes around her. She whispered a prayer, hoping for safety, her small hands clutching the bucket as though it could shield her from the fierce swelling around her. The time is approximately 11:34 p.m. Nigeria time. Amaka began to cry, realizing that the river was too dangerous for her to approach at that hour. She whispered to herself, why is my stepmother doing this to me? Why does she hate me so much, refusing to let anything good come my way? Why? 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 After all I have done for her, I respect her and do everything in the house, yet she treats me like a slave. Only God will reward her. On her way to the river, the environment felt calm yet frightening. Amaka muttered, I am scared to go near this river. Look at how airy calm everything is. As she approached the river, a sinister spirit lurking within saw her and said, Yes, the body I will use and carry out my work has arrived. My aim was to kill her, but now I will enter her body and use her to deceive and destroy the world. It's time to show my power to this world. My daughter, you are welcome. The spirit within the river murmured. When Amaka reached the river, she was afraid to go too close to the water because it was midnight. It wasn't advisable to go to the Imo River at that hour. Amaka said to herself, should I keep going or go back? But if I go back now, my stepmother will beat me badly. She might even hurt me in the process. I don't understand why she hates me so much. I have no other option but to keep going forward.
Amaka started approaching the river. As she got closer, a sound echoed from nowhere. Amaka jumped up, shouted, and looked around to see where the sound was coming from. But she saw nothing. Her heart began to beat faster. Her body started trembling. What have I gotten myself into? Why did I agree to come here in the first place? I am scared, she whispered. From deep within the Imo River, the spirit of deception and destruction looked at Amaka's heart and said, "She is just a good person. She harbors no ill will towards anyone. If there were two people here, I would have chosen the other one. But since she is alone, I will use her body for my work. The only consideration I will give her is this: when her people try to expel me from her body, I will live without harming her because she is good. But until then, I will use her to deceive and destroy the world." The spirit laughed menaciously. The spirit was in form of a massive python. Meanwhile, Amaka had made up her mind to fetch the water, thinking, whatever happens, let it happen. She took a deep breath and moved closer to the river. As soon as she dipped her bucket into the water, something like a chilling mist entered her body, and her eyes turned green instantly. The spirit of deception and destruction took control of her. Amaka commanded the buckets and it stood up. Water began rising, filling it as she ordered it to head straight to her stepmother. She then transformed into a giant python and disappeared into the river. Meanwhile, at home, Susana was waiting for Amaka to return. She said, "Amaka is playing with me. If she comes back here without the water, she will regret the day she was born. Last time's beating was nothing. This one will be deadly." After 2 hours of waiting, without any sign of Amaka, Susana got up to see what was taking so long. When she stepped outside, she found the bucket full of water beside the building. She was surprised to see it. "Oh, so this girl has grown up enough to defy me now. She came back and left the water here without even telling me. She will regret this. Amaka!" she shouted, stepping inside, but there was no response. Susana went to Amaka's room and found it empty. Frustrated, she muttered, "She knows what I will do to her. That's why she's hiding. I will wait for her tonight." Susana opened the back door, hoping to see Amaka, but found nothing. So, Amaka has grown so brave. She will regret the day she was born if she returns tonight. Susana brought the water inside, finished what she needed to do, and then locked both the front door and Amaka's room door, saying, "Let me see how she will get back in." She took both keys with her to her room and went to sleep. By then, her children were also asleep, since it was quite late. At 2 a.m., Amaka appeared inside her room. "My stepmother will suffer in this house," she murmured. "She's had her time to mistreat me. Now it's my turn." Amaka lay down and fell asleep. In the morning, Susana was shocked to find both the front door and Amaka's room door open. She held all the keys, including the spare ones, in her hands. "What's going on?" she muttered. "Has Amaka found a way to unlock doors now? She must have a skeleton key or something." She stormed into Amaka's room, where Amaka was still sleeping. Susana shook her awake, demanding, "How did you get in? I have all the keys." Amaka calmly replied, "I have my own key." Susana insisted, "You are lying. I am holding all the main keys and spare keys." "Show me," Susana said, and without moving, she closed her eyes, and a key appeared in her hand, which she then handed to Susana. Stunned, Susana thought, how did she do that? This is impossible. Where did you go last night? Susana demanded. You came back and left the water outside without even telling me. Amaka answered, I went to my friend's house. Why? Since when do you sleep outside? Susana fumed. I just decided to sleep there last night. I know I haven't done it before, but I wanted this time. Amaka replied calmly. Are you mad? Susana shouted. You no longer fear me. You think you can do as you please now. You are going to regret this. As Susana ranted, Amaka stared at her, thinking, you think this is like before? Now, you will suffer for everything you have put me through. I won't harm you, but you will regret mistreating me. Susana continued yelling, I have beaten you as my child before, but today I will beat you like a slave. She raised her hand to slap Amaka, but her hand froze in midair. She tried again, but it still wouldn't move. She forced it, but it felt as if it was being drawn towards Amaka against her will. Afraid, she didn't know what was happening, and so was too embarrassed to admit it to Amaka. We will see about this, Amaka, Susana muttered, walking away. You are lucky I injured my hand last night while looking for you, but soon it will heal and I will beat you even harder. You have grown too bold, sleeping outside. As she left, Amaka laughed a strange, airy laugh and made the door slam shut instantly. Her eyes glowed green. Susana, she murmured, you will suffer in this house. From that day on, Amaka no longer obeyed Susana's orders. She had reached her breaking point, and with the spirit inside her, she felt an overwhelming power that silenced her fear. Each time Susana commanded her to do something, Amaka would simply stare with those airy green eyes, her face expressionless. One afternoon, Susana called out, Amaka, come and fetch firewood. Are you deaf? Girl! Amaka was sitting calmly in a corner of the room, her gaze fixed on the wall. She didn't flinch or even acknowledge Susana's command. Susana, furious at the lack of response, stormed over and shouted, Didn't you hear me? Amaka finally looked at her stepmother, her voice soft but filled with something that made Susana's skin crawl. Fetch firewood yourself. You have two hands. The audacity of her words struck Susana like a slap. How dare you talk back to me? Susana yelled, but before she could reach out to hit Amaka, her hand froze mid-air, just as it had that morning. No matter how hard she tried, her arm wouldn't move towards the girl. Frightened, Susana took a step back. What? What are you doing? She stammered, feeling a chill run down her spine. Amaka didn't respond. She simply kept her intense, unblinking stare fixed on Susana, who backed away, muttering angrily to herself, but too shaken to do anything else. One evening, Susana, still determined to control Amaka, called her out to the yard. You think you can do as you please now? She hissed. Let's see if you will ignore me this time. But Amaka didn't answer. Instead, she walked straight past Susana as if she weren't visible and went back inside, her footsteps echoing with an unusual weight. The wind seemed to pick up around her, chilling the air. That night, Susana decided enough was enough. She would get help from the village elders. Maybe someone there would know how to bring this stubborn girl back in line. But when she tried to leave the house, she found the door wouldn't open. It was as though an invisible force held it shut. Trapped and feeling helpless, Susana turned around and saw Amaka standing silently in the hallway, her eyes glinting with a strange green light.
Leaving so soon? Amaka asked in a calm voice, her tone mocking. Susana's face drained of color. She backed away slowly, the realization dawning on her that whatever had taken over Amaka was something far beyond her understanding, and it was watching her every move she made. Susana, Amaka said, her voice echoing with a hint of the spirit's power. This is just the beginning. I may be your stepdaughter, but I am not your servant anymore. Susana, shaking with fear, hurried to her room, locking herself in, unable to sleep that night, haunted by the memory of Amaka's glowing eyes. After a while, she slept. The following morning, Amaka said to herself, all the things my stepmother has done to me, it's time to pay her back. As time goes on, I will be putting fear into Susana. She must pay for mistreating me. Despite the love I have shown her, she never cared. But now, it's my turn to deal with her. After finishing her words, Amaka's eyes turned green and she disappeared, only to reappear on the nearby street. She decided to walk down the street. As she walked, a man driving a car suddenly braked in front of her and asked her to stop. Amaka stopped. The man started talking to her. Hey, beautiful, how are you doing? Can I talk to you? Amaka replied, yes, go ahead. The man said, I want to ask you something. I don't want to waste your time. All I need is for you to tell me how much I should pay you so we can go to my house and be together. Don't worry, money is not a problem. Amaka didn't argue with him. She replied, all right, you will need to give me 20,000 naira. The man responded, 20,000 naira is a lot, but I will give you 30,000 naira because you are so beautiful. I just love your shape and everything. Amaka said, okay, I love your shape too, and you are so handsome. You are exactly what I have been wanting for a while. Girls usually don't make the first move, but let's go enjoy ourselves. The man agreed and asked Amaka to get into the car, and she did. When they arrived at his place, Amaka noticed it was very beautiful. They went inside his room. The man said, you can take off your clothes now. Amaka took off her clothes and the man did the same. The moment Amaka saw him undress, the spirit inside her took the man's destiny, blocking his sources of income. The man didn't notice anything. He had no idea he was about to lose everything and return to square one. He didn't know that Amaka was possessed, thinking that everything beautiful is gold. After they undressed, they started making love. During this, Amaka's eyes were a pure green color. If the man had looked into her eyes, he would have noticed, but because of the pleasure, he never bothered to look closely at Amaka. When they finished, Amaka commanded him to sleep. Instantly, he fell asleep. Amaka turned into a large python, disappeared and reappeared in her room. Later that night, Susana went to her room. She was the only one there, as her 3 children were away at boarding school, and Amaka had already finished secondary school. That night, Amaka said to herself, I will make my stepmother run herself tired tonight. I will make sure she is frightened. She thinks she can sleep peacefully. I will wake her up the way she used to wake me up. Immediately, Amaka transformed into a snake and started moving towards her stepmother's room. Please, if you are enjoying our story, please comment, like, and subscribe to our channel to see more of our stories.
When Amaka entered Susana's room in the form of a snake, Her stepmother was getting ready for bed, unaware of what was happening around her. The snake started crawling on the floor toward Susana as she prepared to go to sleep. The moment Susana saw the snake, she screamed, "Blood of Jesus!" and ran out of the room to find Amaka, forgetting all the times she had mistreated her. When she reached Amaka's room, she found Amaka peacefully sleeping in her bed, not realizing that it was actually Amaka who had transformed into a snake to frighten her. Unbeknownst to Susana, Amaka was now possessed. "Amaka! Amaka!" Susana called. Amaka replied, "Yes, Ma." Susana said, "Please wake up and help me." Amaka quickly got up, pretending not to know what was going on. "What is it?" Amaka asked. Susana replied, "I saw a snake in my room just now. Please come and help me kill it." I was shocked to see a snake in my room. Amaka responded, "Did you say snake? Let's go kill it. That snake will regret coming into this house tonight." They rushed back to Susana's room to kill the snake, but they couldn't find it anywhere. They searched the room thoroughly, but there was no trace of any snake. "But I saw a snake right here just now," Susana insisted. "How is it possible that we can't find it?" Amaka said to her stepmother, "If I had seen that snake, I would have killed it right away. I hate snakes. Mom, are you sure I can sleep in my room tonight? You've made me afraid just talking about this snake." Susana replied, "It's not only you, I'm scared too. This is the first time I've ever seen a snake that big, let alone in my own room. I'm really frightened and don't know what to do." Amaka said, "I'm surprised you saw a snake inside the house. Since I was little, I've never seen a snake in here, only outside." Susana added, "Seeing a snake inside is not even the problem. The problem is that the snake I saw was huge. I've never seen a snake like that in my life." Amaka replied, "If I had seen that snake, we wouldn't be standing here talking about it. Things would be very different." Amaka then said to her stepmother, "I'm going back to my room. You can sleep now. Nothing will happen." With that, Amaka left the room. But Susana was still too scared to sleep alone, and her children were not home that night. She thought about asking Amaka to stay with her, but her dislike for Amaka held her back. Susana had always hated Amaka with a passion, though she could never explain why. Eventually, she managed to fall asleep. In the morning, Amaka's stepmother woke up and began calling her. "Amaka! Amaka!" Susana called, but no one answered. She walked straight to Amaka's room, but found it empty. Susana was surprised, as Amaka wasn't the kind of person who usually went outside, especially in the morning. "How come she's not around this early?" she wondered aloud. I wonder. Amaka has grown wings in this house," she muttered to herself. "All right, we shall see. Unless she doesn't come back, I'm waiting for her." When Amaka finally returned home that morning, Susana was already seething with anger. She stood by the doorway, arms folded, her face set in a fierce scowl as she waited for Amaka to approach. "Where on earth have you been?" Susana demanded, her voice harsh and unyielding. Amaka looked at her calmly and replied, "I just went for a walk, Ma. Why do you ask? Who gave you permission to leave this house without telling me?" Susana's eyes were blazing, her patience snapping. "Since when did you start coming and going as you please, without any regard for me?" Amaka's expression didn't falter. "Since when am I your prisoner?" she asked boldly, her voice steady but laced with defiance. "You don't own me, Susana. I can go wherever I want." Susana's face flushed red with fury. Unable to control herself, she raised her hand to strike Amaka. But just as she swung her hand down, an unseen force stopped her. Susana felt her wrist locked in place, as though an invisible barrier had shielded Amaka. Confused and alarmed, Susana stepped back, rubbing her hand as a sharp pain shot through her wrist. She looked at Amaka, who now wore a mysterious smile. "Are you mocking me?" Susana stammered, trying to mask the fear creeping into her voice. Amaka tilted her head, her gaze unsettlingly calm. "You can try to hit me again if you like," she said softly, her tone almost mocking. "But I can assure you, it won't end well for you." Susana took another step back, unable to understand what was happening. She felt a chill run down her spine but pushed it aside, convincing herself it was just her imagination. She looked hard at Amaka, trying to reassert her authority. "Listen, young lady," Susana spat, still attempting to keep control. "You may have everyone else fooled with your innocent act, but I see right through you. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but mark my words, I'll put an end to it." Amaka's smile faded, and her eyes darkened. "You have no idea who I really am, do you?" Her voice was calm but carried an ominous edge. A shiver passed through Susana as she realized, for the first time, that something was truly different about Amaka. She wanted to lash out, to scream at her, but fear kept her silent. Amaka moved past her without another word, leaving Susana standing alone, shaken and unnerved. When Susana entered her room, she sat down and started contemplating. What is going on here? Why is it that every time I try to hit Amaka like I used to, my hand just stops in midair? Is this some kind of magic? I'm beginning to feel afraid in this house. Look at Amaka, the girl I used to control and punish any time I wanted. And now she's the one challenging me, Susana wondered. I need to call her father and tell him what I'm experiencing in this house. Let me step outside to make this call. She walked outside and started calling her husband, Obinna. Obinna answered, "Hello. Susana." "My husband, how are you doing today?" Obinna responded, "I'm fine, my wife. How are you and how is everyone in the house?" "I hope all is well." Susana replied, "Not everything is fine. I need to be honest with you." "What's wrong?" 4 days now, Amaka has been acting strangely. I don't know what's happening to her. What happened? Is she unwell? Is she sick? What is going on? I can't exactly tell, but something's definitely wrong. These days, whenever I try to punish Amaka, my hand just stops in the air. I don't know if she's using some kind of magic against me. I'm confused, my husband. 2 days ago, I saw a big snake in my room. I screamed and ran out, but when I returned to kill it, the snake had disappeared. I'm truly scared. You said you tried to beat her. Why do you want to beat her? What did she do? Please, I don't want my daughter to be unhappy. Susana, if Amaka does anything wrong, just call me and tell me first instead of punishing her. I see her as my first wife. Ever since her mother passed, I don't take anything lightly concerning her. I hope you aren't beating her all the time. I've never beaten Amaka since you married me. I've always treated her like my own daughter. I love her just as I love my own children. The only reason I wanted to discipline her was because of what she did recently. What did she do? She went out and spent the night somewhere without informing me. I heard she was at some boy's place, and I'm sure he must have touched her. Your daughter has become so bold that she now spends the night outside without her stepmother's knowledge. Is that fair? Are you sure Amaka is now spending the night at other people's houses, especially a boy's place? I'm very sure. Please come home so we can decide what to do. Amaka is beyond my control now. Alright, I'll come home by the end of the month. In the meantime, keep advising her to change her behavior, but don't beat her until I return. Do you understand? Yes, my husband. Please come back soon. I'm really scared in this house. Alright, I'll be back. Don't worry. He ended the call. Susana went back inside and headed to her room. As she approached, she saw 9 small children eating on her bed. She rubbed her eyes to see if she was imagining things. When she blinked again, the children were gone. What is happening here? I don't understand what's going on, she whispered, afraid to stay in her room. She grabbed her phone and called her sister. Miracle, how are you doing? I'm fine, my sister. How's your family? Everything's not fine. Are you home now? I need to come over and talk about what's happening in my house. Yes, I'm home. Alright, I'm coming to your place now. She ended the call, took her ATM card, and left for her sister's house. When Susana arrived, her sister welcomed her and offered her a seat. Miracle served her some drinks. Susana. There is fire on the mountain. For the past 3 days, My stepdaughter has been acting strange. I don't know if she's possessed. Things I used to do to Amaka without any consequence now have immediate repercussions on me. I can't control her anymore. If I try to make her do something, she always finds an excuse. It feels like we're fighting for authority in my own house. She continued. The last incident that brought me here was when I tried to flog Amaka. Instead of her feeling the pain, I was the one who felt it. If I slapped her, I'd feel the pain in my own body. And the number of times I've seen snakes in my room recently. They're very big snakes too. To be honest, I'm confused. Do you know what could be causing all this? Susana asked. Miracle. I don't know what to say. I'm confused too. You mean all this is happening in your house? This doesn't sound ordinary. There's something spiritual involved here. Susana, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm scared to go back to that house. I don't know what else I might encounter. Miracle. What about your children? Susana. They're in boarding school and haven't returned yet. All right, I'll give you some guidance on what to do. What's happening in your family is not ordinary. All right, my sister. They talked about other personal matters before Susana decided to leave. Wait, stay and eat something. Thank you, but I'm not hungry. She left Miracle's house and returned home. When she arrived, the house was calm. Susana called out, Amaka, Amaka, but no one responded. Where could she be at this time of day? If I say anything, her father will just tell me to leave her alone, she murmured as she headed to her room to rest. Unknowingly, as she entered her room, she saw a large snake lying on her bed. Susana screamed, Jesus! Jesus! She tried to run out of the room, but as she neared the door, it suddenly closed on its own. Seeing the door shut, Susana fell to the ground and fainted. The snake slithered toward where Susana was lying on the floor. The spirit of deceit and destruction wanted to kill Susana right there. However, since Amaka's spirit was controlling the snake and her heart was good, she tried to prevent the snake from biting Susana. Then, the spirit of deceit and destruction began to question Amaka from within the snake. The spirit of deceit and destruction said to Amaka's spirit, "Why do you pity this woman? After all she's done to you. I don't like people with a heart as soft as yours. If you won't kill her, I'll make sure you do it whether you want to or not. You'd better do it now before I take over." Amaka's spirit replied, "My lord, I know that my stepmother mistreated me in the past, but if I kill her now, my father will be heartbroken. He'll think he's cursed, that his first wife died, and now his second wife too. I can't bear to see my father cry. I love him dearly. He's never let me suffer, so I won't let him suffer either." The spirit of deceit and destruction snarled, "I don't care about your reasons. Do what I told you, or I'll do it myself." Inside the snake, Amaka began to cry. As her tears flowed, the snake itself began to shed tears as it lay beside Susana. Amaka pleaded with the spirit inside her. "Please, I beg of you, consider my father. If it weren't for him, I'd do as you ask." She continued, "This stepmother of mine isn't a good person, but I won't kill her. She will suffer though, and I promise she will regret meeting me in this life." The spirit of deceit and destruction replied, "Fine, as long as she suffers. Teach her a lesson she'll never forget. I love destruction." With that, the spirit within Amaka calmed down. The snake transformed back into Amaka. She stood up and saw Susana still lying unconscious on the floor. Amaka turned to her and said, "You're lucky that I love my father. I cared for you when you married him. I knew you were against me, that you never wanted to see me succeed. If it weren't for my father, I'd end this right now. But trust me, you will suffer in this house." Then Amaka disappeared, leaving her stepmother alone on the floor. 20 minutes later, Susana woke up, confused. When she tried to stand, she felt weak but managed to get to her feet. Susana murmured, "What's happening to me? I'm terrified. Every day I keep seeing snakes in this house. It's too much. I need to ask Amaka if she's seen any snakes around here." Susana walked to Amaka's room and found her sleeping. She hesitated outside, thinking to herself, Amaka doesn't seem to care about anything in this house anymore. When Susana approached Amaka, she called, Amaka, Amaka, wake up. Amaka woke up, irritated. What is it? Why are you yelling my name like you've lost your mind? Are you okay? Susana wanted to shout back but held herself in check. Amaka, she said, I keep seeing snakes everywhere in this house. Do you see them too? Amaka replied, No, Ma. I haven't seen any snake. But which snakes are you talking about? Are you sure you're seeing them? Susana answered, Yes, it's been happening a lot lately. I'm frightened. Amaka shrugged. I don't see any snakes. Let this be the last time you bring this up with me. Pretending not to hear Amaka's dismissive response, Susana muttered, It's strange. The frequency of these sightings worries me. I don't think I can sleep alone anymore. I'm completely fed up. Amaka responded indifferently. You're the only one seeing these snakes. I don't understand it either. Susana left Amaka's room and called her husband. Hello, my husband, she greeted. How are you? I'm fine, Obina replied. Please come home soon. I need you here, she said, distressed. I'm at my breaking point. Only you can make this better. When are you coming back? I'll be back this weekend, Obina reassured her. I'll take care of whatever's going on. I can't wait to see you, Susana replied before ending the call. Later in the evening, Susana asked Amaka to buy some food supplies. She handed her the money. Amaka went to her room, where she performed a spell. Within moments, all the groceries appeared in her arms. She brought them to Susana. Susana was astonished, as it hadn't even been 15 minutes since she gave Amaka the money. Did you go to the market already? She asked, bewildered. You're back so soon. How did you manage that? Amaka replied, I ran there quickly so you wouldn't beat me. You always punish me if I take too long. Susana was speechless. She took the groceries to the kitchen to prepare the meal. After cooking, she gave Amaka her portion. Later that night, as Susana was about to sleep, she heard her name being called. She turned to see who it was, but no one was there. She lay back down but soon heard her name again. Once more she found no one. Fear crept over her, and she rushed to Amaka's room. Amaka, were you calling me? She asked. Amaka replied, No, it wasn't me. Her stepmother's voice trembled. Who's calling my name? She returned to her room but froze when she saw several small children on her bed, eating. Terrified, she ran back to Amaka. Amaka, come with me. Look at what I found in my room. Amaka followed her, but when they got to the room, no one was there. Susana was left feeling deeply unsettled, wondering what was happening to her. When the weekend arrived, Obina returned home from his work at the company. When he reached home, Amaka rushed to him and hugged him. Daddy, you are welcome, she said. Obina smiled, my lovely daughter. How are you doing? I'm fine, Dad, Amaka replied. Just then, Susana came out of her room, where she had been praying, asking God to come to her rescue. My sweetheart, you're welcome. I've been expecting you, she said to Obina, though she kept glancing at Amaka. Obina asked, Why didn't you open the door for me when I was knocking? Susana replied, I was praying because of what's been happening in this house. Praying, huh? When did you start praying in this house? Bina asked. You're not the type of person who usually prays. Even when I ask you to pray with me, you always have an excuse. How come you're praying now? All is well. Who told you I don't pray? Susana retorted. I pray. I just don't like praying with others. Obina scoffed, that's a lie. You don't pray. Yes, I admit I didn't pray before, but now I'm born again. I didn't know the value of prayer back then, but now I do, and I'm not going to stop. It's good to pray always. All right, let's go inside our room, Obina said, and they both entered their room. Amaka went to her own room. Susana's children were still away at boarding school. Later in the evening, after everyone had eaten, Susana said to Obina, I want to talk to you about something I'm suspicious of concerning Amaka. You need to know what's going on. I've mentioned it to you before. Obina said, go ahead. I'm listening. It seems like Amaka is possessed now because she's been acting strangely in this house. The things I've seen here over the past 3 weeks honestly baffle me. I'm beginning to suspect that Amaka is the cause of everything, Susana said. Obina replied, how do you know that Amaka is behind all these things you say are happening? The Amaka I know is a good person. She isn't evil or possessed. Why are you labeling her like this? I'm sure of what I'm saying. I have to speak the truth. Since the day I sent her to fetch water from the Imo River at midnight, strange things have been happening in this house. Obina interrupted. Did I hear you say Imo River? You sent Amaka to fetch water from the Imo River in the middle of the night. Why would you do that, knowing how dangerous that river is, especially at night? You're mistreating my daughter, aren't you? Every time I come back you act like you care for her, but deep down you hate her. Is it because I'm not always around? Is that why you have the courage to treat Amaka this way? Susana replied, I'm sorry. I regret it now. Amaka has been nothing but good to me. But I don't know what's come over me. Obina said, you're sorry. Is that all you have to say? Why is it that whenever I ask Amaka if you're treating her well, she tells me that you're the best, that she's never had a better stepmother, and that you've never mistreated her even once? She's covering for you, isn't she? Not knowing that you've been tormenting her by sending her to a dangerous place like the Imo River at night. Susana, filled with guilt, said, I'm so sorry for all I've done to Amaka. I regret everything. Amaka has been kind to me, and I can't explain why I've hated her so much. My husband, we need to figure out what to do because I'm afraid in this house right now. It seems Amaka doesn't want to harm me. She's only instilling fear in me. If she intended to harm me, she could have done so by now. Amaka has had the opportunity but hasn't taken it. With what I've seen, I believe Amaka can now turn into a snake. She can do anything now. We need to act fast, Susana concluded. Obina said, I'll first observe her myself to see if she's truly possessed or not. I'm honestly surprised by what you're saying. How could Amaka be possessed? I'm telling you all this based on facts and my experience, Susana insisted. She's definitely possessed. All right, I've heard you. But I need to see it for myself before I believe you. Who knows if you're lying just to punish her? I need to confirm first, Obina said. Okay, you'll soon see what I'm telling you, Susana replied. They later went to sleep. The next morning, Obina woke up and went to Amaka's room. He knocked and said, Amaka, it's me, your father. Come in, Amaka replied. He opened the door, entered her room and sat down. Amaka, how are you doing? How was your night? He asked. I'm fine, Dad. How about you? I'm fine, Obina replied. But tell me, why did you say that your stepmother has been treating you well when I asked you before? The spirit inside Amaka suddenly grew angry. It became restless in response to Obina's question. The spirit spoke to Amaka. Amaka, I don't like how you've restrained my power. You refuse to use your strength in your own home and keep allowing them to look down on you. It's time to act. You're too passive, and I don't want to control you too much. But you must take certain actions on your own. Amaka, speaking to herself, thought, I need to teach my stepmother a lesson she'll never forget. But first, she decided, I need to remove all the memories my stepmother planted in him about me. That way, even if Susana accuses me of being possessed, he'll never believe her. Amaka continued, Dad, I'm sorry, but I'm going to remove some of your memories. I have to teach Susana a great lesson. Obina looked at Amaka with concern, noticing a calmness in her gaze that was unlike her usual warmth. He shook it off, believing she was simply tired. Amaka, he began, I know you said Susana treats you well, but is there anything you haven't told me? Amaka looked at her father, her heart torn between the love she felt for him and the need to protect herself from what Susana might tell him. She took a deep breath, trying to ignore the spirit's restless whispers urging her toward action. Amaka used her powers to manipulate her father's mind, erasing any doubts that might make him believe Susana's words against her. Everything is fine, Dad, she replied softly, masking her inner turmoil with a gentle smile. "I just want you to be happy." Obinna sighed in relief, unaware of the forces at play within his daughter. He reached over and patted her shoulder. "You're a good girl, Amaka. I'll always be here for you." As Obinna left her room, Amaka closed her eyes and focused on her stepmother. She whispered, "Susana will no longer plant lies in his heart about me." When Obinna returned to his wife, he didn't mention anything about Amaka being possessed. All he said was, "Go and prepare food for me." As Susana headed to the kitchen, she asked, "But my husband, you didn't tell me the outcome of what you went to check." "Obinna, I don't understand." "What do you mean?" "Susana, you went into Amaka's room to ask if what I've been telling you is true, that she's truly possessed." "Obinna, Susana, stop this. How can you say that? This is pure accusation. My Amaka is not possessed and never will be. Don't bring up possessed or not possessed in this house again. Just go prepare my food." "I know what I'm talking about. Amaka has changed for the worse. I'm speaking from experience." "Take your experience somewhere else. I don't want to hear it." Susana walked away to the kitchen to prepare the food. As Susana prepared lunch, she felt a chill crawl down her spine. Her hand shook, and the knife slipped, nearly cutting her finger. "What's going on?" she murmured, looking around the empty kitchen with wide eyes. She sensed something unseen, a presence watching her, causing a shiver to run through her. At that moment, Amaka stepped quietly into the kitchen. Susana jumped, her nerves already on edge. "Amaka," she said, trying to stay calm. "What do you want?" Amaka gave her a piercing look, her eyes strangely intense. "I came to remind you that you'll soon answer for everything you've done to me." Susana's face turned pale. What are you talking about?" Without breaking eye contact, Amaka's voice lowered, almost a whisper yet filled with authority. "Did you think you could mistreat me without consequences? The isolation, the wickedness. And now you're trying to turn my own father against me. But no more." Fear overwhelmed Susana. She could barely breathe as Amaka's words echoed like a haunting melody. She stumbled back, gripping the counter for support, wondering if the girl before her was even human anymore. As Amaka stood there, she stretched out her hand. As she raised it, Susana began to rise in the air. Shocked, Susana tried to scream, but no sound came out. Amaka had used her powers to silence her voice. Amaka said, "You will regret your life today." With Susana hanging in midair, Amaka commanded a bowl of water to pour over her stepmother's body. As the water drenched her, Susana attempted to call for her husband. Amaka then commanded a large pot in the kitchen to strike Susana on the head. As the pot hit her, the pain nearly drove her to tears. Amaka made the pot hit her again, harder this time. Susana started crying, hoping her husband would come to her rescue, but no one came. Amaka made the pot hit her one last time, hard enough to make her faint. Susana finally fell to the floor, unconscious. Amaka left the kitchen, leaving Susana lying on the ground. Meanwhile, Obinna was asleep. After he'd told Susana to prepare the food, he'd gone to lie down, unaware of the events unfolding in the house. 10 minutes later, Susana woke up, feeling exhausted. Remembering what had happened, she began to cry. "What have I done to myself? Ever since I sent Amaka to the Imo River, everything about her has changed for the worse. My fear began that very day. My husband, who I thought would help me, doesn't believe that Amaka is possessed," Susana muttered as she continued cooking. When she finished, she served Obinna his food but decided not to tell him yet. Obinna asked for Amaka's food, but Susana told him to ask Amaka to get her own from the pot. Obinna didn't argue. After finishing his meal, he went to Amaka's room and told her to go get her food from the kitchen. Amaka said, "Thank you, Dad. I'll go get it later." Obinna left. That evening, as Obinna relaxed in the living room, Susana cautiously approached him. Her face was pale, and her hands were trembling. "Oh, Binna," she whispered, her voice barely steady. "There's something wrong with Amaka. She's not just possessed, she's haunting me. She's evil. If we're not careful, she might kill me." Obinna frowned, noticing the raw fear in her eyes. He'd never seen her so shaken. "Susana, I told you I need proof. Are you sure this isn't your guilty conscience? You admitted mistreating her. Since I came back, I haven't seen any sign of possession. Stop disturbing me with these accusations. My Amaka is not possessed." "No," Susana stammered. "I'm telling you the truth. There's something powerful inside her. Can feel it. Today, she looked at me as if she could see right through my soul. If you saw what she did to me in the kitchen, you'd feel pity. She lifted me in the air and commanded a pot to hit my head until I fainted." "Amaka is evil and possessed," Susana insisted. "All right, Susana," Obinna said slowly. "But honestly, your story sounds like a dramatic episode. I need proof, not fairy tales. You need to take this seriously for once. Amaka nearly led me in the kitchen, and you're treating this like fiction. I'm telling you what's happening in this house. Amaka is possessed, and we need to find a solution before it's too late. I'll keep a close watch on Amaka, but until I see proof, I won't let you label her like this. I know my daughter. This story you're telling me doesn't add up. If you won't do anything, I'll call a pastor. Tomorrow, I'll look for a powerful man of God to help us. That's up to you. I've said what I needed to." Later that night, Susana lay in bed, her eyes wide open, plagued by nightmares and fear. Shadows seemed to flicker on the walls, each one reminding her of Amaka's piercing gaze. Meanwhile, in her room, Amaka sat quietly, her mind focused. She knew that teaching Susana a lesson had brought her peace, but she wanted to do it in a way her father wouldn't question. As she closed her eyes, the spirit within her whispered, "Tonight, let her understand the fear she's inflicted on you. Show her that you're not to be trifled with." Amaka nodded. For too long, she had endured Susana's cruelty in silence. But now, she was ready to make her stepmother feel the weight of her actions. The next morning after that night, Susana woke up and turned to her husband, who was already awake but still lying in bed. "Susana, my husband, I want us to talk." "Obinna, what is it?" "Susana, it's about Amaka. It surprises me that even now, you haven't noticed anything unusual about her. You haven't realized that she's possessed. It's like you're no longer observant. If you were, you'd see that Amaka has changed. Obinna, are we back to this again? Haven't I told you that I'm observing her to see if she's truly possessed? Please let me rest in peace. How do you expect me to check for something like that? How would I know her behavior has changed? Susana, if you really wanted to know, you'd find out. You ignore her because you love her more than you love me and my family. Obinna, who told you I don't love you and our children? If I didn't love you, I wouldn't be the one taking care of you, paying our bills, and supporting our children's education. And here you are saying I don't love you or your family. Please let me sleep. Susana, I won't let you sleep. There's something I want you to watch for in Amaka today, so you'll see that she has changed. Observe if she sweeps the house this morning. Use this as proof that she's not the same Amaka. Obinna. Fine, I'll watch her today. Amaka always wakes up early to sweep the house. I'll see if she does it. Susana. Yes, please check and see if what I'm telling you is true. For the past month, Amaka hasn't swept this house. Whenever I confront her, she tells me she's not my maid. Thank goodness you're here to witness it. Obinna, don't worry. If she refuses to sweep, I'll tell her myself to do it. Susana, good. That's all I want. Amaka thinks she's grown in this house. Let's see if she'll still challenge you. Meanwhile, in her room, Amaka overheard their conversation. She hadn't planned to sweep that morning, But out of love for her father and to show Susana she was ready for any challenge, she decided to sweep. She thought, I'll do this for my father's sake. With only 2 days before he left for work, she knew it would soon be just her and Susana again. Amaka got out of bed, picked up a broom and began sweeping. As Susana continued talking, she suddenly heard the sound of sweeping. Amaka raised her voice slightly as she sang while sweeping, ensuring both her father and stepmother could hear her. Obina, still lying down, hearing the sweeping Susana. Are you hearing what I'm hearing? Susana. Yes, I'm hearing it too. Let me go check. Susana went out and saw that Amaka was indeed sweeping the house. Shocked, she returned to tell her husband. Susana, it's Amaka. She's actually sweeping the house. I'm surprised. Obina. But you said she wasn't sweeping. I told you there was nothing wrong with Amaka, yet you keep saying she's possessed. Can we drop this? Let this be the last time you accuse Amaka without reason. I don't know why you dislike her. Susana. I'm just surprised. She hasn't swept in over a month. Obina. And you're still talking about it. I'm leaving. Obina got up and went to the parlor. Seeing Amaka, he greeted her warmly. Obina. Good morning, Amaka. How are you? Amaka, I'm fine, Papa. She continued sweeping the parlor. Obina went to the bathroom to freshen up while Amaka swept the entire place, both inside and outside. When she finished, she went to her father and Susana's room. Amaka. Auntie Susana. Is there anything else you'd like me to do before I go rest in my room? Susana, puzzled, thought, since when does she come to me like this? Susana hesitated, worried that if she asked Amaka to cook, she might be poisoned after their recent conflict. Susana. Just warm the food for your father. I'm not ready to eat. Amaka. Okay. She went to the kitchen to warm the food. Obina. To Susana, I told you Amaka is a good person. She always has been. Susana remained silent, secretly unsettled. Later that morning, Susana decided to visit her sister, Miracle. Susana. I'm going to Miracle's place. I'll be back in the afternoon. Obina, all right. When Susana reached her sister's house, she was welcomed warmly. Miracle. Sit down, sister. What brings you here? Susana. It's about Amaka. Things have only gotten worse. I don't know what to do anymore. Miracle. You're still dealing with that issue. I thought it would be resolved by now. Susana, it's my fault. Everything started because I forced Amaka to fetch water from the Imo River at midnight. Since then, my misfortunes began. Miracle. What happened? You sent her to a river at midnight. Susana. Yes, and that river is dangerous at night. Ever since she went there, strange things have been happening to me. Amaka once loved me, but I don't understand why I've hated her. Miracle. I'll speak to my pastor about this. He might have a solution. Susana. I'd like to go with you to the church. Miracle. All right, let's go now. They arrived at the church and met the pastor in his office. Susana recounted her story. Pastor, I've heard you. Let's pray. God will deliver you. After praying, the pastor addressed Susana. Pastor. You are the cause of all this. Why did you send Amaka to the Imo River at night? She became possessed by a spirit from that place. According to the spirit speaking to me, Amaka's love for you is the only reason she hasn't harmed you. Pastor, before I come to your house for deliverance, you must fast and pray for 14 days. Only then will God forgive your sins toward Amaka, as you're responsible for her torment. Susana, I'll do it. I'll fast if it means ending this nightmare. Pastor, fast from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for 14 days. Susana agreed. She and Miracle returned to Miracle's house. Miracle. This is a lesson. Wickedness only brings suffering. Start your fasting tomorrow. Susana. I've never fasted before, but I'll try. I have no other choice. Miracle. You must try if you want to be free of fear. Pray and fast so the pastor can come and deliver you." They finished talking and Susana left for home. When Susana returned from her sister's place, she walked over to her husband and said, "My husband, I want us to talk." Obina, "All right, go ahead." Susana, "I just came back from my sister's place. I complained to her about Amaka and told her I think she's possessed. She recommended that I see her pastor. I asked her to take me to him, and when we got there, I was surprised that the pastor already knew about Amaka's situation. He told me that Amaka's possession is the cause of all my suffering. He confirmed that she truly is possessed and advised me to start a 14-day fast and prayer. He said that after the fast, he will come to our house for a deliverance session to set Amaka free from the evil spirit within her." As Susana was still speaking, Obina interrupted her. "Obina, so what do you want me to do now?" Susana, "Nothing. I just want you to know that Amaka is possessed by an evil spirit. We need to do something now while it's still early, so it doesn't become uncontrollable. Obina, I've told you countless times to stop saying that Amaka is possessed, but you don't want to listen. Fine. If you want to fast and pray, you'll do it on your own. I only have 7 days left here before I have to go back to work. You know my leave period is almost over. Whatever you're doing, it's up to you. If you think Amaka is possessed, handle it yourself, alright? Count me out of this." Susana, "I'm not asking you to help with the fasting and prayer. I just wanted to inform you. I'll start tomorrow morning." Obina, "Alright, go ahead. Just count me out. As I said, I only have 7 days left here." Meanwhile, in her room, Amaka overheard what Susana was planning. Amaka said to herself, "I'm waiting for her. She thinks she can be free in this house. Let's see how she succeeds with her fasting and prayer here. I'll show her that I'm still in charge of everything. I won't let her succeed in this fast and prayer. Not in this house." Amaka vowed to prevent Susana from completing the fast and prayer she was planning to start. After that day, the following morning, as Susana prepared herself mentally for the 14 days of fasting, she felt a strange sense of apprehension. Her mind drifted back to the pastor's words. She knew it would be challenging, especially since she'd never fasted before, but she was determined to go through with it. Susana woke up early, intent on beginning her fast. She avoided breakfast, and by mid-morning, hunger pangs began to creep in. She was just about to sit down and pray when she noticed Amaka standing nearby, watching her with an unreadable expression. Amaka's voice was calm, almost chilling. "Auntie Susana, why are you not eating today? Is something wrong?" Startled, Susana quickly shook her head. "It's nothing, Amaka. Just not hungry." Amaka gave a slow, knowing smile and walked away without another word, leaving Susana feeling uneasy. As the day progressed, Susana tried to focus on her prayers, but every time she closed her eyes, strange images flashed through her mind. Dark shadows, flickering lights, and an overwhelming feeling of dread. She felt compelled to eat, her hunger intensifying beyond anything she'd experienced before. She resisted, but as the afternoon wore on, the desire became unbearable. Finally, she gave in, telling herself it was just a slip. The next day, Susana woke with a fresh resolve. She wouldn't let anything stop her from fasting this time. But as she knelt to pray, she felt a strange heaviness in her limbs, almost as if an invisible force was holding her down. She couldn't focus, her thoughts scattered by whispers she couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, Amaka quietly observed Susana's struggle, her eyes flashing with a hidden power. She knew exactly what Susana was attempting and had vowed not to let her succeed. Amaka muttered softly to herself, "You think you can pray your way out of this? Not while I'm here." Each day, as Susana tried to begin her fast, something would happen to interrupt her. On the third day, she awoke to find her food prepared by Amaka, who claimed she wanted to make peace. The sight and aroma overwhelmed Susana's senses, and once again, she broke her fast. By the 5th day, Susana was growing weak, both physically and mentally. She hadn't managed to complete a single full day of fasting, And each time she tried, Amaka seemed to know and would distract her, whether through strange occurrences, unusual sounds, or her silent, knowing stares. On the 7th day, Susana decided to seek her husband's support, though she feared his reaction. "Obinna, please, I need your help," she said, her voice trembling. Obinna, puzzled, looked at her. "What's wrong?" "It's Amaka. I feel like she's preventing me from doing what I need to do. I just want to fast, but every time I try, something happens to stop me." Obinna frowned. "You're being paranoid, Susana. Amaka is just a child. How could she possibly stop you from fasting?" Susana tried to explain, but Obinna shook his head, clearly unconvinced. "Maybe this is just your guilt weighing on you. You need to focus and stop imagining things." Feeling isolated, Susana returned to her room, disheartened. She began to pray silently, but a powerful drowsiness overtook her, and before she knew it, she was fast asleep. As the days wore on, Susana's attempts at fasting continued to be thwarted, each failure adding to her growing despair. Amaka seemed to anticipate her every move, and with each passing day, Susana became more convinced that there was indeed something sinister at work. By the 12th day, Susana was desperate. She sat alone in her room, tears streaming down her face. She could no longer deny it. Amaka was not just an innocent girl. There was something dark and powerful within her, something that wouldn't allow Susana to complete her fast. Amaka, sensing Susana's defeat, passed by her room and whispered, "Didn't I tell you, Auntie? Some things can't be fixed by fasting." Terrified and feeling utterly helpless, Susana realized she needed more than just her own strength to survive this ordeal. She knew then that if she were ever to rid herself of this torment, she would have to find another way. On the night of the 7th day of fasting and prayer, Susana sat in her room, contemplating what was happening in her family. Susana said to herself, "What should I do next? This 14-day fasting and prayer miracle that my sister's pastor told me to do is choking me. I'm only on day 7, but I can't say I've completed a single day correctly. Sometimes I don't even realize when I go and start eating. Other times I forget that I'm supposed to be fasting. Not once have I completed a full day of fasting. I'm so confused right now. What am I going to tell the pastor?" she wondered. According to him, I need to fast so that God will forgive me for what I did to Amaka, sending her to the Imo River late at night, which led to her possession. As Susana was still thinking in her room, her husband came in. "Obinna, my wife, you don't look happy. I hope all is well." "Susana, all is not well. I keep telling you that Amaka is possessed, and she's trying to bring shame upon me in this house. I've been complaining, but you won't do anything about it. Look at the fasting I plan to do. I'm on the 7th day out of 14, but I don't know what's happening to me. I can't seem to stay serious with the fasting and prayer. Some force is stopping me from following through with my plan. Obinna, I don't care about your fasting. My responsibility in this house is to provide food for you, Amaka, and the children. Stop telling me about Amaka. I don't care if she's possessed or not, as long as I'm not seeing any signs myself. Until I see it with my own eyes, I won't believe she's possessed. By the way, I'm going back to the company tomorrow. I've stayed here for almost a week and a half, and my leave period is over. I need to start my journey tomorrow morning. I just wanted to remind you." "Susana, so you want to leave me alone with your possessed daughter in this house? You know my own children are at boarding school, and you expect me to stay with someone who hates me? There is Gadu." "Obinna, you're still talking about this possession. Are you serious that Amaka is possessed?" "Susana, yes, I'm very sure she is possessed. Obinna, I'm still not convinced. I'll be leaving tomorrow, and when I come back, I'll decide what to do. Right now, I don't know what else to say." "Susana, all right. I'll try to figure something out. I'm confused, but I trust God will help me with this problem. Obinna, I want to go to sleep now so I can wake up early for my journey." "Susana, all right, I'll stay up a bit longer." Obinna went to bed and fell asleep. Susana sat in the chair in the same room, still thinking about what she should do next. She said to herself, after my husband leaves tomorrow, I'll go to my sister's miracle pastor. I need to tell her how my fasting is going. I don't even know if I'll come back to this house. I don't want to stay with Amaka. I'll stay at my sister's place for now until I find a final solution. I'm afraid to stay here with Amaka. About 30 minutes later, Susana finally went to bed. The next morning, Susana watched Obina pack his bags. She felt a surge of fear as she realized she'd soon be left alone with Amaka, a girl she was convinced harbored something dark. She needed to find a solution quickly. As Obina prepared to leave, Susana tried one last time to make him understand her plight. Susana. Please, Obina, listen to me. I don't feel safe with Amaka here. It is different. Something is wrong, I know it. Obina sighed, looking at her with a mixture of frustration and pity. Susana, you're getting worked up over nothing. Amaka is just a child. Whatever is going on, it's in your head. If you're so afraid, then you look for what to do. Susana was silent, swallowing her resentment. She had been hoping for understanding, maybe even a sign of support, but she knew now that she was on her own. Obina gave her a final hug and left the house. As his car drove away, Susana felt a wave of unease wash over her. The house felt colder, quieter, almost ominous. Determined not to be intimidated, Susana decided to visit her sister's pastor again. She needed guidance, reassurance, and most importantly, a plan. She called her sister and explained her fears. Later that morning, Susana arrived at the pastor's office. She sat in front of him, anxiety etched on her face. Pastor. Sister Susana, it's good to see you again. How is the fast going? Susana hesitated, feeling ashamed. Pastor, I can't complete a single day. Every time I try to fast and pray, something stops me. It's like a force beyond my control. I'm starting to believe that Amaka herself is preventing me from doing this. The pastor regarded her with a grave expression. The enemy often works in subtle ways, especially when he knows we're trying to rid ourselves of darkness. But don't lose hope, Sister Susana. What you need now is spiritual strength. Let me pray for you to fortify you against this darkness. And once you're strengthened, you must continue your fast, no matter the obstacles. He stood and placed his hands on her head, praying fervently for her protection and resilience. The prayer session lasted nearly an hour, and Susana felt a renewed sense of courage as she left the pastor's office. As Susana left the pastor's office, she clutched her bag tightly, feeling a sense of hope mixed with anxiety. She had been prayed over, but was it enough to face Amaka? Her sister's house was a short walk away, so she decided to visit and recount everything that had been happening, hoping for some comfort. At her sister's home, Susana was greeted warmly, but her tense demeanor immediately caught her sister's attention. Miracle. Susana, you look exhausted. What's wrong? Susana sighed deeply. It's Amaka. I went to see your pastor again. He prayed for me and told me to keep going with the fast, but I don't know if I have the strength. Miracle. You have to stay strong, Susana. I believe the pastor's guidance will help you overcome this trial. Why don't you stay here with me for a few days? It'll give you some peace. Susana nodded gratefully, relieved by the thought of a temporary escape. Thank you. I don't know how I'd get through this without you. After a long conversation, Susana felt lighter. She decided to stay with her sister that night, hoping that a break would give her the clarity she needed to resume her fast and confront her fears. However, back at home, things took an unsettling turn. That night, Amaka moved about the house as if searching for something. Her quiet footsteps echoed in the stillness, her shadow flickering in the dim light. She paused at her father's empty room, her gaze lingering on the bed, almost as if she sensed his absence. As the hours passed, strange occurrences began around the house. Items were inexplicably moved, and the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. It was as though the house itself was unsettled, reacting to Susana's absence. The next morning, Amaka was on her way home from a place she went to, she walking along the dusty path that cut through the neighborhood. Her steps were quiet, her gaze focused straight ahead, but something in her aura seemed to attract attention. She hadn't gone far when a young man stepped out from a nearby shop and called her over. "Hey, beautiful," he greeted, his smile bright. A few crisp bills fanned out between his fingers. "How about you come with me for a bit? Just a little fun, and you'll be well taken care of." Amaka stared at him, her face expressionless, but her eyes held a strange glint. After a moment, she gave a small nod. With the promise of money, the man thought he'd won her over easily. He had no idea who he was inviting into his life. They went to his small apartment nearby, where he quickly pulled her into his world of fleeting pleasures. He felt victorious, smug, as if he'd gotten exactly what he wanted. But little did he know, Amaka was something he could never have anticipated. A vessel of ancient powers, carrying more than just a spirit within her. As they lay together afterward, something peculiar happened. The young man's strength seemed to drain, his energy waning by the second until he was barely able to move. That strange glint in Amaka's eyes grew fiercer as she rose, leaving him sprawled on the bed, his once vibrant dreams and ambitions fading like a distant memory. He felt empty, as if something vital had been ripped from him, leaving only a hollow shell. Not long after, a second man crossed her path, another stranger drawn to her mysterious allure. Just like the first, he stopped her and offered her money, thinking he could buy a moment of intimacy with her. And just like before, Amaka accepted with a silent nod. In the privacy of his home, she watched him with calm detachment as he reveled in his small victory, unaware that his fate would mirror that of the first man. When he finally lay exhausted, Amaka's powers stirred, reaching into the depths of his spirit. Without a single word, she took everything, the ambitions, the passions, the future he'd once seen for himself. By the time Amaka left, he too was left an empty shell, just as oblivious to what had really happened as the first. Amaka walked away that morning with the quiet satisfaction of her purpose fulfilled. The two men, however, were left with fading memories and hollow souls, unable to explain the strange emptiness that now haunted their lives. They had crossed paths with something far beyond their understanding, and they would carry the weight of that encounter for the rest of their days. After that day, the following morning, Susana decided to check in on the house. She returned alone, feeling an unusual heaviness as she approached the door. The house was eerily silent, but as she stepped inside, she was struck by the unusual chill in the air. She cautiously moved through each room, finding objects misplaced and her belongings slightly shifted. Her unease grew, especially when she found a doll lying on her bed, a doll that belonged to Amaka. Susana's heart raced. She whispered a prayer under her breath, her hands trembling. The doll's glassy eyes seemed to watch her, and a shiver ran down her spine. She knew this was no ordinary disturbance. It felt like a warning. Determined to face whatever was in store, Susana steeled herself. She would confront Amaka, but this time she would arm herself with the pastor's words and prayers. She was ready to stand her ground. That night, she resumed her fast with a renewed sense of purpose, staying vigilant in prayer. She was determined to see this through, even if it meant uncovering unsettling truths about her household. As she prayed, she felt an invisible weight lift ever so slightly, and for the first time in days, she felt hope stir within her. On the second day of her 14-day fast, Susana woke up early, feeling determined. She remembered her talk with the pastor, which gave her strength to face the darkness around her. She walked around the room, praying softly and holding her Bible close to her. But soon her struggle began. Without Susana noticing, Amaka stood in the shadows, watching her. Amaka's eyes had that strange, scary glow as she observed her stepmother, sensing Susana's plan to stay strong. As Susana prayed, she felt her energy fading. Her eyes became heavy, and her body felt weak. Amaka's presence was pulling her focus away from her prayers. Still, Susana fought back. She whispered her prayers, even as her voice became weak. Every night, Amaka's presence seemed to fill the house, making Susana feel restless and tempting her to quit her fast. But each day, Susana's will grew stronger. On the fourth day, Susana woke up to find her things scattered around the room. Holding her Bible tightly, she sensed she wasn't alone. A faint whisper urged her to give up. She shivered but closed her eyes and prayed even harder, even as a chill ran down her spine. By the seventh day, Susana was extremely tired. As she knelt by her bed, waves of exhaustion and doubt nearly overcame her. Her vision blurred, and frightening thoughts filled her mind. But she kept praying, her whispered words breaking the silence. She felt like something beyond her was helping her, keeping her grounded. Unknown to her, God had noticed her struggle. On the ninth day, as she prayed, she felt a sudden warmth around her. It was as if an invisible shield had been placed around her. When Amaka tried to come closer, an unseen force kept her away, protecting Susana. With each day, Amaka grew more frustrated. Her attempts to stop Susana's prayers became stronger, but every time, a calm presence blocked her power. By the 11th day, Susana felt almost unbreakable. Her prayers were stronger, and the darkness around her seemed to fade. On the 13th night, Susana was deep in prayer, and Amaka made one last attempt to break her. In the shadows, Amaka's gaze was fierce, and a dark power filled the room. The air became heavy, and Susana struggled to breathe. But then, a gentle warmth filled the room, a divine presence that lifted her from her despair. "Be still," a voice whispered in her heart. "I am with you." With this comfort, Susana kept going, her heart filled with new strength. The final day of her fast arrived, and she knelt by her bed, tears flowing as she prayed, asking for forgiveness. She felt a huge weight lift, and her spirit was free from fear and anger. As she finished her prayer, a radiant light filled her. In that moment, God saw that Susana's heart had truly changed. Her bitterness was gone, and her desire to be better was real. She had completed the 14 days of fasting and prayer. As the sun rose, Susana felt a warmth she had never felt before. She knew God had heard her, and she felt His forgiveness in her soul. After Susana completed her 14 days of fasting and prayer, she decided to visit the pastor to inform him that she had finished. Susana said to herself, "I'm so happy that I finished this fasting and prayer. I can't believe I was able to do this. I've never done anything like this before. I'm truly proud of myself." Meanwhile, Amaka was in her room, feeling unusually weak. All her plans against Susana that day had failed. The spirit inside Amaka, realizing that Susana had embarked on a mission to set her free, tried to manipulate Amaka to stop Susana, even if it meant killing her. But God continued to protect Susana, looking into her heart and seeing her sincerity in wanting to change her ways. Susana had resolved to abandon her evil behavior. She vowed never to go back to her old ways, even if God saved her from her current situation. She had seen the consequences of being evil and had decided to turn over a new leaf for good. After completing her morning tasks, Susana began preparing to visit her sister's house so they could go to the pastor's office together. Once she was dressed, she left for Miracle's house. When Susana arrived, she knocked on the door, and Miracle opened it, welcoming her inside. Susana sat down and began sharing the good news she had brought. "Susana, my sister, I'm so happy right now. I'm surprised that I was able to finish my 14 days of fasting and prayer. Since I started, I haven't experienced the things Amaka used to do to me every night. I believe this fasting and prayer affected her too. I want to meet the pastor and let him know I've completed it. I need to hear his next steps in ensuring that Amaka is free. I know I'm the reason she became possessed, and it's my responsibility to help her get delivered from this spirit tormenting her. Miracle, I'm so happy for you. Finally, you've completed your fasting and prayer. I believe God can see that you're ready to change from your bad behavior. But my sister, I need to tell you something," Miracle continued. "What you're going through now should be a lesson for you. Every action you take or seed you sow has consequences. You've admitted to not treating Amaka well. Why were you mistreating her so badly?" Susana. I don't even know why I hated Amaka. She's always been good to me and respects me deeply. I will never treat her that way again. From now on, I will be a mother to her. My main focus now is to ensure she is delivered from this spirit tormenting both her and me. Susana. Come with me to the pastor's office. I need to inform him that I've completed the fasting and prayer. Miracle. Okay, no problem. Let me take a quick bath and get ready. Miracle hurried to take her bath, dressed up, and joined Susana. Miracle, let's go. As Susana and Miracle arrived at the pastor's office, the air seemed lighter, as though a heavy burden had been lifted. Susana was nervous but also hopeful. She had taken the first step toward redeeming herself and freeing Amaka from the spirit's grip. The pastor welcomed them warmly. Pastor. Sister Susana, I'm glad to see you again. Congratulations on completing your 14-day fast. It's not an easy journey, but you've shown determination and faith. Susana nodded humbly. Susana. Pastor, I came to thank you for guiding me and to ask for the next steps. I've realized how much harm my actions have caused Amaka and even myself. I want to make things right. The pastor smiled. Pastor. God's grace is sufficient for you. What you've done is only the beginning. Deliverance is a process. The spirit tormenting Amaka knows it has been exposed and will fight harder to hold its ground. That is why we must act decisively. But first I need to ask, is your heart truly ready to forgive her and love her as your own child? Tears welled up in Susana's eyes. Susana. Yes, Pastor. I'm ready. I promise to love and care for her from now on. Pastor, good. Then we will set a day for her deliverance. In the meantime, continue to pray. The battle is not over, but victory is assured. The pastor went into his office, brought out a bottle of olive oil, and said to Susana, I will give you this olive oil. Spread it on Amaka's door when you are sure she is inside her room. After you do that, call me, and I will bring my prayer warriors to come and do the deliverance. God has already answered your prayers. Susana replied, okay. She collected the olive oil and said to the pastor, I will spread it in front of her room and then call you. The pastor said, yes, that will prevent her from having the strength to leave before we arrive at your house. Susana responded, all right, we will head home now. The pastor nodded. Okay. When you're done, give me a call. Susana and Miracle left the church. When they reached Miracle's house, Susana said, my sister, I will be going home now so I can do what the pastor asked me to do. Miracle replied, all right, my sister. God will see you through. As Susana prepared to leave, fear suddenly overcame her. She imagined what might happen and decided to ask Miracle to escort her to the house. Miracle, please, Susana said. I think you should come with me to my house. I'm scared to go there alone. Please follow me. I know nothing will happen, but I just need you with me. Miracle responded, okay, no problem. Heard you. Wait for me, let me drop something. Miracle went inside her room and grabbed what she needed. They started heading back to Susana's house. When they arrived, Amaka was not around. They dropped their bags and began praying. After they finished praying, Susana prepared food for herself and Miracle. When she was done, they ate together. She also set aside a portion of food for Amaka. 3 hours later, Amaka returned and saw Susana and Miracle. The spirit inside her urged her to kill Susana. But because of the love she had for her stepmother and the power of God now in control of the house, she decided to suppress the spirit. Amaka greeted her stepmother and Miracle, then walked into her room. Susana served Amaka the food she had prepared, and Amaka ate it. A little while later, Amaka went to bed to rest. When Susana noticed Amaka was in her bed, she took the olive oil, sprinkled it in front of Amaka's door, and returned to her room. She picked up her phone and called the pastor to inform him that she had followed his instructions. Hello, Pastor. It's Susana, she said. I have done what you instructed me to do. I've sprinkled the olive oil in front of her door, and she is now inside her room. Please come quickly. When Amaka tried to come out, she touched the door, but it shocked her as though it was electrified. This was because of the olive oil her stepmother had sprinkled on the door. She attempted to disappear but couldn't. Surprised and frustrated, she tried several times, but there was no way for her to escape. Meanwhile, as Susana ended the call, the pastor knelt in his office, bowed his head, and began to pray fervently. "Lord," he murmured, "I commit this battle into your hands. Grant us victory over every evil force tormenting Amaka's life and disturbing Susana's household. Strengthen us with your power, for we are but instruments of your will. Amen." The prayer intensified as the pastor rebuked the spirit binding Amaka, declaring her deliverance in the name of Jesus. After several minutes, he stood up, feeling spiritually fortified, and began calling his prayer warriors one by one. The first call went to Brother Michael. "Brother Michael," the pastor said, "it's time. Meet me at the church immediately. We have a pressing assignment." "I'm on my way, Pastor," Michael replied without hesitation. The second call was to Sister Deborah. She responded eagerly, "Pastor, I've been waiting for this call. I'll be there shortly." The pastor continued until he had reached all 5 of his trusted prayer warriors: Brother Michael, Sister Deborah, Evangelist Samuel, Brother Matthew, and Sister Gloria. Within the hour, they had all gathered at the church. The pastor addressed them with urgency. "Children of God, we have a mission tonight. A young girl named Amaka is under the torment of a powerful evil spirit. Her stepmother has taken a step of faith, and now it's our turn to act. But before we go, let us unite in prayer to prepare ourselves spiritually." The group formed a circle in the church's main hall. Hands clasped and heads bowed, they began to pray, invoking the power of the Holy Spirit to guide and protect them. The room filled with their voices, rising in unity as they called on the name of God. "Father, we ask for your presence to go with us," the pastor prayed. "Let no weapon formed against us prosper. May your light shine into the darkness in Amaka's life and bring her freedom. Amen." Each prayer warrior took turns praying, covering every aspect of the upcoming deliverance. For nearly an hour, they prayed fervently until they all felt a sense of divine assurance. Finally, the pastor declared, "It is time. God has gone ahead of us. Let us go to Susana's house and claim victory in Jesus' name." With their Bibles, bottles of olive oil, and unwavering faith, the group set out for Susana's home. The night was quiet but heavy, as if the very air around them anticipated the spiritual battle to come. At Susana's house, the olive oil on Amaka's door continued to restrain her. She was trapped, pacing angrily within her room. The evil spirit inside her was restless, whispering threats and curses, but Amaka's own resolve and the divine power surrounding the house prevented the spirit from acting. When the pastor and the prayer warriors arrived, Susana and Miracle greeted them with relief. "Pastor, she is still in her room," Susana whispered. "The olive oil is working, but she's been trying to get out." The pastor nodded. "Let us begin. Victory is certain." The group entered the house, their voices rising in unified prayer as they prepared to confront the darkness within. The pastor clapped his hands and said, "Everyone, form a circle." His voice carried authority, and without hesitation, everyone responded, quickly arranging themselves into a tight circle. The pastor began singing a worship song, his deep voice resonating in the air. The prayer warriors joined in, their voices rising in unison. Even Susana and her sister, hesitant at first, joined the song, their voices trembling but steady. As the pastor transitioned from worship to prayer, the atmosphere in the room changed. A heavy tension filled the air, and it became clear that something spiritual was about to happen. The pastor's prayers grew fervent, his voice rising in intensity. Suddenly, Amaka, who had been sitting silently, began to twitch. The spirit within her reacted violently to the prayers, causing her to scream and thrash. In a burst of inhuman strength, she kicked the door so hard that it broke, and she stormed out. When she emerged, her eyes glowed an eerie green, radiating malice and power. Everyone froze in terror, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. The prayer warriors, Susana, and her sister instinctively rushed to the pastor, seeking protection. The pastor, unshaken, raised his hand and declared with authority, "Spirit inside this child, I command you in the name of Jesus to leave her body. This is not your home, and it will never belong to you." Amaka, or rather the spirit controlling her, began to laugh, a cold, mocking sound that sent chills down everyone's spines. Through her lips, the spirit sneered, "You are a fool, pastor. This body is mine now. Control it. Operate through it. Who are you to command me? I have come to stay." The pastor stood firm and responded, "You are gravely mistaken. This body belongs to God, not you. Today your reign ends." The prayer warriors, gaining courage from the pastor's confidence, began to pray fervently. They sprinkled olive oil around the room and on Amaka. The spirit screamed in rage as the oil touched her, and then, before their eyes, Amaka's body transformed into a massive, terrifying snake. Screams erupted as everyone but the pastor ran out of the house, too frightened to stay. Susana and her sister clung to each other, trembling outside. Only the pastor remained inside, unwavering in his mission. The pastor knelt, raised his hands to heaven, and prayed with all his might. "God Almighty, show your power today. Let this spirit know that you alone are the creator of heaven and earth. Send down your fire and consume it." The snake hissed and slithered around the room, but the pastor continued praying. As he called upon God's name, the snake began to convulse. Slowly, it transformed back into Amaka's human form. Amaka stood up, her face twisted with malice. The spirit laughed again and taunted the pastor. "You are too small to defeat me. I am the spirit of deception and destruction, and I stay wherever I choose. This body is mine forever." Undeterred, the pastor pressed on. He began to sing a powerful hymn, calling upon the name of God. The room seemed to shake as he prayed louder, his faith unyielding. Suddenly, Amaka screamed, clutching her head, her legs and her back. "My head, my leg, my back," she cried, her voice a mix of pain and anger. She collapsed to the floor, writhing as the spirit struggled to hold on. The pastor called to the prayer warriors outside, "Come in now. Hold her down." They rushed back inside, this time with renewed courage. Together, they held Amaka as the pastor anointed her forehead with olive oil, praying with all his strength. The spirit let out one final scream before it was expelled. It fled from Amaka's body, rushing out of the house and disappearing into the river where it had originated. Amaka opened her eyes, looking confused. "What is happening? Why is everyone here?" she asked weakly. Susana knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. "Don't worry, my child. I'll explain everything later," she said, hugging her tightly. Turning to the pastor, Susana said with deep gratitude, "Thank you, Pastor. I don't know how to thank you enough. God bless you." The pastor smiled humbly. "All glory belongs to God. Let us pray and give thanks for his victory today." Everyone joined hands and bowed their heads as the pastor led a heartfelt prayer of gratitude. "Thank you, Lord, for proving yourself as the one true living God. Thank you for delivering this child and restoring her. May your name be praised forever." When the prayer ended, the pastor and the prayer warriors began to leave, their mission accomplished. Susana hugged her tightly again, whispering, "You are safe now, my child. Everything will be okay." As they watched the pastor walk away, Amaka's stepmother made a silent vow to ensure her family would never encounter such darkness again. Amaka said to Susana, "Mom, what happened?" Susana said to Amaka, "I'm sorry for everything I've done to you. All the times I mistreated you, please forgive me. I'm truly sorry. It was the work of Satan, but I have changed for good. From now on, I will treat you as my first daughter forever. If I ever go back on this promise, let God take my life. It's because of me that you were possessed by an evil spirit. I'm so sorry. Thank God you're now delivered." Amaka looked surprised and said, "You mean I was possessed by an evil spirit? How? When did this happen?" Susana replied, "Yes, you were possessed at the Imo River. It happened the night I sent you to fetch water there at midnight. Since that day, strange things started happening in this house. You would transform into a snake to frighten me, and every day and night, I lived in fear because of you. When all these things were happening, I blamed you at first. But later I realized it was my fault. If I hadn't sent you to the river, none of this would have happened. But thank God you're now delivered. Amaka said. You mean all of this happened here in this house? I had no idea. I still can't believe it. How could all this happen without me knowing? Anyway, thank God I'm free. Amaka knelt down and prayed, thanking God for delivering her from the evil spirit. Susana said, I will never make you suffer again. It's time to make up for all the pain I caused you. Amaka, however, was still unaware of everything that had happened to her, including how the spirit manipulated and controlled her. But she thanked God for restoring her freedom. Susana was overjoyed and reflected, it's not good to be wicked in life. My wickedness caused pain not just for Amaka, but for me as well. This has taught me an important lesson. Whatever you sow is what you'll reap. Never mistreat someone just because you have more money or power than they do. No one knows what tomorrow will bring. Every action has consequences. She prayed aloud, God, thank you for everything. Thank you for restoring peace in my family. I've learned my lesson the hard way, and I promise to change for good. After her prayer, Susana called her husband, Obina, to tell him everything. When he answered, she said, Hello, my love. God has answered my prayers. Amaka is now free from the evil spirit. I called a pastor, and he delivered her and cast the spirit out. Obina replied, Glory be to God. Although I never noticed anything strange about Amaka, if you say she's now free, I thank God for that. I'm happy you're finally at peace. In the past, whenever you called me, it was always about Amaka's case. But today is different. I'm glad you'll have rest of mind now. Let this experience teach you a lesson. Wickedness is never the way. It's always better to treat others with kindness. Susana said, I've already learned my lesson. You don't need to lecture me anymore. I've made a promise to myself to change for good. Amaka will even tell you herself that I've changed. After their conversation, Susana hung up. As time went on, Susana treated Amaka as her first daughter. She started buying gifts for her, and their relationship transformed. Amaka, who never used to laugh with her stepmother, now played and laughed with her. They became so close that people mistook them for twin sisters. Wherever Susana went, she made sure Amaka accompanied her. Even for special occasions, Amaka was always by her side. Amaka now found joy and happiness with her stepmother. She spoke proudly of how kind Susana had become, saying she no longer took her kindness for granted. When Susana's biological children returned from boarding school, she said to them, From today onward, I don't want to hear you calling Amaka by her name. From now on, you'll address her as Auntie. Do you hear me? They all replied, Yes, Mom. Susana smiled and said, Good. I love you all. Susana's transformation was complete. She now saw everyone as equal and treated everyone with respect, regardless of age or status. As a result of her changed behavior, blessings began to pour into her family. Obina received a promotion at work and was able to open a large shop for Susana. Her business flourished and more customers came her way. Money and peace returned to their household.